Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited today to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, all the way from Sarasota in Florida, the USA, of course, Matt Mueller, who's the founder of the Mindful Innovator, and also author of the book with the same name. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Matt. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you, Jürgen. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you right now.
Now, you speak about innovation, which is kind of the umbrella theme of this podcast, even though we branch off into different areas of that. And you also talk a lot, and we were having this chat just before we started recording, about how we often overcomplicate things in regards to innovation. So I'm really keen to explore that some more and learning about some of the stories you have to back that up. And certainly I know the book releases in November, which is probably just about the time we'll be releasing this episode. So it'd be good to start to explore some of the ideas in the book as well. Now, before we jump into all those topics, what's the impact you're making in the world, Matt?
Well, the impact I'm trying to make in the world is to help others really create change to make this world a better place. All right. I think we, like I said, overcomplicate innovation, overcomplicate the trying to make change. And it really doesn't have to be. So very few change makers are out there in the world out of 8 billion people. How can we make more? I want to make more.
Great. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And change, one of the paradoxical things is a lot of people say, oh, we don't like change and it's a threat and we crave certainty. And on the other hand, of course, we also crave variety. We'd be bored silly if we were stuck in, like, what's that that film, Groundhog Day? That'd be so boring. So we, at the same time, we crave that variety. And of course, our entire environment, our body, ourselves, we're changing all the time. So it's this paradox, isn't it? People are threatened by change on the one hand, but they crave it, and it's happening to them without their influence anyway.
Well, they don't mind other people changing to create an experience for them, but it's when that change happens internally is where people really struggle. And it comes down to that we build these habits, like we do this same thing all the time. And I learned a lot about just kind of like the brain science behind it, where, you know, when we were cavemen back in the day, we were always looking for change. And when we saw change, we went into fight or flight mode, right? It was always a matter of trying to preserve ourselves rather than to prevail. So now we have a much different landscape. We don't have to worry about things jumping out of the bushes out of us. But the same center part of our brain still thinks the same exact way about change, that it's a threat. So we are very scared of doing that.
Yes, that's interesting, that whole idea of how the brain works and how that primeval need for survival, I guess, trumps everything else. And that's a good thing, obviously, depending on the environment. But sometimes it gets in the way, right?
Oh, it does. Yeah, fear does get in the way when you're looking at change. I always talk about my seatbelt moment where, you know, I had to deal with change myself, but it was really hard for me to face it. So the seatbelt moment I'm talking about, at one point I was 360 pounds and I went on a roller coaster ride with my son. We waited online for 2 hours in the hot heat of July out in New Jersey. And my wife, like before I got on the line, she's like, hey, I think you might not fit on this ride. You probably should check. I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to be fine. It's no issue. I mean, I've never had an issue before. If I was trying to get a table at a restaurant, I couldn't sit in the booth, no problem. I got a regular table. I was on a plane, no problem. They gave me a seatbelt extender. So, you know what? This is not going to be an issue. I wait 2 hours. I get to the top of the ride, and the kid puts us into the seats and tries to lock us in. Son, no problem, locked in. He comes up to me, and the thing would not secure. It wouldn't click. So he calls over a couple of his friends, and next thing you know, I have 3 teenagers bouncing on my stomach like a trampoline trying to get this ride to just go. And unfortunately, after about probably 30 seconds to a minute, which felt like an hour, they said, I'm sorry, you can't get on the ride. You won't fit. So me and my son had to walk off the ride. And that moment there was a moment where I realized I needed to change. And that's like my seatbelt moment. But it's something that I knew. I knew I had to change, right? I knew I was overweight. I had to do something about this, but I never did. And it comes down to that moment there. I had no choice but to accept the fact that I had to do something. I had to admit that I needed to change. And I had this visceral emotional feeling of just disappointment and just being upset with myself that I wasn't making the change. So that was the point where I said, you know what, I need to do something. And I started telling people right away, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to change myself now because of this moment. I even had my wife take a picture of me in that seat just so I could remember that moment. And that's when I was on that weight loss journey, just to create that change, because I knew I needed to do it. And a lot of times with business as well, it's like you have to try and create that seatbelt moment within innovation, within an organization. How can you get a company to get that visceral emotional feeling that, you know what, we need to do something about this, otherwise our business is at stake. And that's kind of like, you know, really where you are able to kind of influence change, is when you have that emotion attached to it.
That connection. And it's a motivational driver, isn't it? So in your case, it was that feeling of having disappointed your son, I guess, of not being able to go on the ride with him.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a little mad at me for not being on a line for 2 hours for no reason.
Yeah. All right. Now, your business and the book is called The Mindful Innovator. So what's behind that title? So the mindful part, obviously, is the thing that is unique and unusual. What's behind that?
Yeah, I've been innovating for over a decade now in a couple of organizations. And when I was innovating, when I first got the call to do it, I really had no clue what I was doing. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a background in innovation. I was just, all right, let's innovate. And when I first got the first innovation role, I was so excited about it. I went home. I dreamt about all the things I would do. We need to add robots to this. We need to put lasers somewhere, AI, AR. What else? Other acronym can I add here? It's just all these different things that we could be with tech forward. And I started reading a ton of content on innovation, different books, Blue Ocean Strategy, Start With Why. I just started reading about everything, consuming anything I could find. And I found myself making decisions within the innovation world for the sake of making decisions, right? Moving forward to move forward. It was like fail fast, innovate or die, disrupt or be disrupted. I felt like I just had to keep on making decisions. And what I realized was that I was getting overwhelmed and I was overcomplicating it. And it reminded me a lot like when I got my cell phone, my first smartphone, where I was just overwhelmed by the text notifications, the Facebook posts, and then also, of course, the cat videos on YouTube. I was just inundated with content and I couldn't think about anything else. I was never present in the moment. I was always on my phone, and it made me get that overwhelming feeling. A lot of people correct that by using meditation, by being mindful to bring back your awareness to the present moment. So since the feelings were the same with my innovation practice as well as it was for my smartphone, well, why wouldn't meditation and mindfulness work for innovation? So I started to apply the same exact techniques I would use to break away free from my smartphone and use that within innovation. So the Mindful Innovator is really all about bringing awareness back into the decisions that we make and really observing what's happening in the world, and not just, jumping to conclusions or moving forward just for the sake of moving forward.
So it's a lot of that then is being open to paying attention to what's happening externally, listening to people, that kind of thing, right?
Oh, yeah, that's imperative. You have to make sure that you're looking at that external stimuli and get outside of your own mind. A lot of times we create our own problems, right? It's we might think that animals want better water, like bottled water, because the tap water has chlorine and minerals in it. And I might think that's the problem. In fact, one gentleman did think that back in the 90s, where that was a huge issue for the pet industry. So we started to create a bottle of water for animals. And it did amazing. When he first tested it, it was like 15,000 dogs and cats he would test with, and every single one of them loved it. I think he had like a 95% acceptance rate on this. So he's like, you know what? I think I have a great idea. So he polled about 100 people, asked questions about, hey, would this be something that you would think about purchasing? A lot of people said, yeah, sure, I would think about it. So he launched this product in stores all across the United States. And I thought it was going to be really successful, but he didn't really sell any product. It went out of business fairly quickly. And the reason why was because that humans or dogs, they don't have wallets. They can't purchase this bottled water. So yes, you got 95% acceptance rate on animals, but they're not the consumer. So was it really the human, the pet owner's problem, that their dog or their cat wasn't having water that was from a bottle? Well, a lot of dog owners said, well, you know what? It's kind of cool, but I'm not going to do it because my dog drinks from a toilet and I'm fine with that. So everyone was fine with their animals drinking their current tap water or toilet water, and they didn't need bottled water. But this man thought this was an absolute, like, dead center great idea. He was trying to solve his own problem instead of looking externally and talking to people. If he talked to veterinarians, they said, you know what, this isn't really necessary. He spoke to pet owners. Yeah, you know what, I'm not a big deal. But he had it in his own mind that this was a problem that he needed to solve. And for 12 months plus, he's working on this product that's really not going to help anybody.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I had to laugh there because I know our cats have their favorite source of water is the dirty water in the, like, if it rains heavily here and we've got some bowls or some utensils outside that are dusty and dirty, and so they get filled up, and of course all the dust and dirt's at the bottom. It's rainwater, but which is probably pretty good, but all the dust and dirt's in there, so that's their favorite drinking source. And I think, well, the bottled, purified bottle, like that. Probably wouldn't touch it. Yeah, so some of that, I think some of that in the pet industry is an interesting one, because a lot of the appeal there is not for the wellness of the animals themselves, but for the emotion that the human pet owner has. That's like, I spend money on my pet, so aren't I a good pet owner? Aren't I being kind to my pet? Well, the animal probably doesn't care.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that irrational feeling that you think you're doing a good thing. Maybe today it'll work. In the 90s, it didn't work. But I spoke to some consumers about this after pet owners about this after I found out this case study, and it found out there was that emotional connection to their animals of wanting to do something that made sure that their animals were getting, the right food, the right water, and the right amount of it. So it really came down to a lot of consumers saying, well, you know what? No, bottled water I don't need. I'm fine with tap water, but making sure that my animal always has water when I'm not home. I might work for 8 to 10 hours a day. What if they drink all the water? What if they have no food? So it was a matter, maybe it's a water fountain that you could have created that would have been really solving a problem for pet owners that would have helped, ease their minds while they weren't able to take care of their pets.
Yeah, so it's really about identifying what's the real problem rather than, and also, I guess, talk to us a little bit about how you approach that, because rather than approaching it from, hey, I've got this great idea about bottled water for pets, approaching it from, what if I'm going to work with pet owners, what are some of the things that bother them? What are the issues that they have that are unresolved and that frustrate them and that they need help with?
Yeah, when you're trying to identify that problem, it's the most important thing to do is listen, right? And a lot of times I think we don't do that. So if you're talking to pet owners, you have to go to first you have to talk to consumers. You have to talk to the people that you're going to want to purchase this product or service. And when you're doing that, you have to come ready to listen, to be a protege, and they be the mentor, right? So they know everything. It's ethnographic research where you go talk to pet owners in their homes, talk to them in the stores, and really just ask them the questions. What are the things that keep you up at night? What are you scared about with your pet? What makes you prideful about being a pet owner? And just asking very broad questions to them and listening, and just sit there and listen. Don't think about your next question. Don't think about, how you're going to respond or how you're going to internalize their thoughts and say, yeah, me too. No one cares, right? It's a matter of just listening to that consumer, listening to that person in front of you, and asking an intelligent question afterwards. Don't worry about the silence after the question if you haven't thought about it yet. Just make sure you fully understand it and that you're listening to the consumer. If you do that, you're going to be ahead above a lot of people today.
And one of the things that I like to point out in that listening is to suspend judgment completely. And I guess in the context of innovation, that means if you get the seed of an issue pop up, don't try and solve it there and then. Just keep digging into it.
Yep.
And I think this is...
Put a pin in it and keep moving.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like with in this case here of this bottled water for pets, you might think it's an issue for animals to drink water from the tap. Forget about what you think. Don't ask that question directly to a consumer. Really find out what they think about the whole situation with their pet, rather than focusing or targeting in on your question, because people want to be agreeable. So if I ask you, Jürgen, how do you feel about your animals drinking tap water with all those chemicals in there, with the chlorine and minerals that aren't good for your cat and dog? How does that make you feel? So I'm already leading you to a response that you're going to probably say, I don't like that idea of having my animal having chlorine and minerals in their water. Where if I just ask the question more broadly, more mindfully, and listen, you're going to get much better answers. Might not fit your hypothesis, and that's totally okay. That's great. You're going to actually get to a real problem.
That's right. So that's the mindful part, is really being in the moment with that person, listening, and not leading or not prejudging. Yeah.
And one of the ways that I kind of like do that when I'm talking to consumers or to stakeholders within a company, I use exactly what I use in my meditation practice, right? So when I'm meditating, your mind starts to wander. Probably 40 times every single minute, your mind is going off to what's for dinner tonight, or what I got to do after this meditation. And you have to keep on saying to yourself, begin again, and you just go back into the meditation practice, right? And you clear your mind and get back to it. But you might say begin again, 40, 50 times a minute, or whatever it is. When you're talking to consumers, you're gonna have to do the same thing, but instead of begin again, it's just listen again. So as soon as you get off that path, use that same meditation practice of listen again. And when you do that, you start to train your mind to truly listen, actively listen to your consumer, to the person that's in front of you, rather than starting to think about that next question. So it does help you bring that level of awareness and mindfulness to a conversation.
Yeah, I love it. So listening is really key. And we've had quite a number of folks on the podcast talking about listening more in the context of leadership. So it's interesting to visit it in the context of innovation, and how can we simplify innovation, and how can we make sure we're actually innovating with something that's meaningful.
Yeah, and that's I think where we really miss the mark a lot of times, that we're not innovating with purpose. And if we just listen, and then also have the right framework of how we might solve a problem, and also overcome the barriers that you have within an organization, like getting people to accept the idea as a great solve. If you think mindfully about all those components, you'll have a much greater rate of success on innovation.
Speaking of organizations, how can an organization get to this point of mindful innovation, as opposed to, a lot of organizations that, and certainly that I've experienced, they say, okay, we're going to be an innovative organization, so we'll have this little team or this department of innovation. And that's the worst thing I think that can happen, because that's very much what you said right at the beginning, is where we overcomplicate it, where somebody then says, I've got to innovate, I've got to do something fancy, without any context, without, well, what's the problem that we're solving, and so on. How can an organization turn that around, or if they're just starting out and saying, well, we want to kind of be more innovative, be more cutting edge, how can they take this path of mindful innovation as opposed to that other one?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, like when you talk about the innovation team coming in and having to come up with something really fancy, something new, cutting edge. And that's how a lot of organizations approach their innovation teams. But you have to think about, is that the right way to do it? And yes, it would be great if everybody within the company was an innovator. That would be totally awesome. It's extremely hard to do, because it takes a very different mindset. When you're in an organization, you're usually held to productivity goals. So I have to hit certain sales goals. I might have to hit certain marketing goals, whatever it may be. But I am being measured on my performance off these specific measurements, where now I'm not able to really get my creativity involved or think outside of the box, because I'm just focused in on productivity. So where an innovation team can come in handy is when you use them properly. And instead of saying, hey, I want you to come up with some really cool, fancy widget that's going to solve or save the day, how does that innovation team transform the culture within an organization to be innovators? Make them your champions to innovation. So this way, now instead of trying to output product, you're outputting a mindset. So as you bring in a marketing team, a sales team, what are the things that you want to teach them on how they can be more innovative? How do you facilitate innovation within an organization? So this way, now if you have a group of whatever it may be, 5, 10 people that are your champion innovators, they have those keys of how might we innovate more mindfully. And they can then teach that to the organization and spot the issues that the rest of the organization doesn't see and guide them along a path. And really, that's the key of an innovation team, is to facilitate and be those change agents within the organization. That's where I've seen the best successes come from organizations.
Yeah, I love that. So it's rather than they're the ones coming up with all the ideas, they're the resource for the organization to actually change its values, its culture, its behaviors to be more innovative, and they can then be called upon to, well, how do we solve this problem? How do we bring innovation to play in these things that we need to be doing daily? Yeah,
absolutely. That's definitely the way to go. And also just even think about it as like put yourself within let's call it the marketing team, and put yourself in their position. If I come up with an innovative solve as an innovation team on ways to better market to consumers and to reach them in their homes, and I go to the marketing director and say, hey, here you go. Here's a great concept that we've developed for you. You need to go out and execute now. How are they going to take that? Are they going to be happy that you are changing their world, making them do everything differently? It's going to be
you go and do your job and let me worry about mine because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, how are you going to get people to launch your concepts if you don't get them to accept it? And if you bring it to them and force feed them innovation, they're never going to be able to help you. They're not going to launch it because they're going to find the flaws within the innovation. But if you bring them along for the ride and you bring them in early and say, hey, we want to help you. What are some of the big problems that you're seeing within your marketing department? Oh, you're not reaching consumers in their home. Okay, how might we approach it a little bit differently? Let's put some stimulus out there and see, well, how are people doing within other organizations in our competition? How are they doing it? And trying to find those key insights and help that marketing team come up with the concept. They're going to be 10 times more likely to support it. I don't know about you, but I really like my ideas. I'm sure, Jürgen, you like your ideas. We all like our ideas. Yeah. It's just a common thing. So when all of a sudden it's my idea that I'm pushing, I'm going to work 10 times harder for it when it goes into a launch phase and getting it out there.
Yes, that's a really important point. And it reminded me, one of the key moments, I guess, in my life, in my career, that just shaped my whole attitude to innovation was when I was working for ACFA, the film manufacturer, at the time when the digital camera launched, and I experienced firsthand inside that organization the kind of at first the panic, then the burying the head in the sand period, and then the trauma, which I was one of the rats that left the sinking ship before the trauma kicked in, because I recognized it was going down. I was one of the few people in the organization in those early days, and I was just a young graduate researcher there. So I didn't have the clout, but I was one of the few people that said, hey, this is something we should pay attention to, and there's a potential that this may very quickly develop into something serious in those early days. How can people in the organization that are in a position where they don't necessarily have a lot of clout, where people don't necessarily listen to them because they're sort of way down the pecking order, how can they be heard if, like in that example, there was an external change happening and people were not taking it seriously enough, in my opinion, or if somebody has a wonderful idea because they're at the coalface, they're working at the coalface, they've experienced problems, they've seen there's a real need for a solution to this problem, and I've got an idea how we might address that. How can they bring the organisation in to listen to them and start to talk about the idea so that it actually gets some momentum and moves forward?
That's a loaded question, Jürgen. It really depends, right? It depends on the organization, the culture that's there. some cultures, if you speak out of turn and say, hey, this is a problem that I'm seeing, you might get fired. I mean, it really could be that case. So it's really a matter of first knowing your organization and what type of culture you have. But no matter what, it's really a matter of it's a matter of approaching it properly, right? So you don't want to go to the executive leadership and say, hey, you have a big problem, right? We're getting disrupted by the digital cameras, and we're not going to have film industry pretty soon. If you approach it that way, you're probably not going to get very far. But if you approach it in questions, asking for their guidance, their advice, hey, I noticed that a lot of people are buying digital cameras. What are we doing to solve keeping consumers buying film, or what are we considering doing outside of film to balance our business out? And if you approach it by asking questions rather than just giving your concerns and working with people to create solves, that helps you start to seed those thoughts of how might we change, right? So it's really comes down to asking the right questions to the right people to really start to seed the opportunities to change.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I can tell you what the response was to some of those questions that were certainly asked. I certainly asked them, and there were a couple of other people that asked them, and the response was pretty much, we'll just keep making better film.
Oof, yeah.
Digital's never going to be any good. Yeah.
It is tough.
Sometimes, bear in mind, this was in the very early days when what was out there was not very good. But those of us that had seen other things develop, and the PC was just starting to develop at that time, so that there were a lot of signs there that the pace of development of some of these new technologies was going to be so much faster than anything we'd ever seen before. And there was a pretty strong chance that this could develop very quickly into something that was competition to film, even though in those early days it definitely was not like that.
Yeah.
And that's what people saw that and said, oh, we don't got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, early on, it's hard to identify those problems just at the right time. But one thing that has worked for me in the past has been to try to create that seatbelt moment, right? Where if I were to figure out how do I get the executive leadership team or the right people within the organization, whoever they are, to realize it's a problem, how do I get them to have an emotional response to the problem that we're trying to solve or that you see, right? So if you saw that was being a real problem, can I go and talk to 12, 20 consumers and ask them one question on camera, asking them, will you ever use film again now that you have a digital camera? And if you have 20 people saying, no, never again, no, never again, no way, why would I use that? And you start to get those videos. Videos are very powerful and they speak, volumes to executive leadership teams. It puts them in the homes of consumers. It puts them in the seat of a consumer. And that's when sometimes it's like, oh shit, we have a problem. I need to do something about this. Is that kind of that moment when you get that emotional response. And if you can get them to say, oh shit, and then tell them we need to do something about this, now you have broke ground and you can move forward and actually try to innovate towards something else. But it comes down to really creating that seatbelt moment. And everyone's going to be a little bit different on how you create it, depending on the situation. But just think about, how can I get an emotional response out of my team to realize that, yeah, we do have a problem. We need to do something about it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What's the role of communication in that? I mean, we talked a lot about listening and suspending judgment there, but what you're talking about here is communicating with the team in a way that you build that emotional connection to not just the person that's communicating, but to the message itself, to the environment or situation that you're presenting.
Communication is absolutely key. I mean, there's tons and tons of books about the topic. Everyone talks about it within leadership. Communication without it, I mean, yeah, we're definitely screwed. We wouldn't be able to innovate. In fact, one story in my book I talk about with a whole chapter dedicated to communication is that one word can potentially change a whole situation. In fact, one word actually killed about 300,000 people, and that word is makasatsu. Back in World War II in Japan, we wrote up the Potsdam Declaration, right? The Allies did. And we said that we need to end this war today, or there's going to be clear and utter destruction. Japan took that note and went with 6 people within the cabinet to really say, okay, what are we going to do about this? They were tied 3-3 in the cabinet saying, yes, we're going to surrender, or no, we're going to keep on going. And they needed to go to the prime minister to say, hey, what do you think to break that tie? Someone from the press actually reached out to one of the people within the cabinet and said, what is your response to the Potsdam Declaration? He responded, makasatsu. Makasatsu can mean 2 different things. It could mean that I ignore in contempt or no comment. Those are the 2 different things it can mean. Very different. So as it was translated back to the U.S., it was that I ignore in contempt, meaning go screw yourself, I don't care, which means we dropped the bomb on Japan, killing 300,000 people. If we would have learned what the real interpretation to it was, which was actually he meant to say no comment, there might have been a completely different outcome. So communication is absolutely key. I mean, our situations aren't going to be as dire as that, but we need to think about how are we communicating? How often are we communicating? And exactly, what are we saying? So it really is an imperative to innovation, is making sure that we are communicating properly to our consumers, and also to our executive team and to everyone within the organization that needs to help create that change.
Yeah, that's a very powerful story, and certainly highlights that choose your words carefully, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on the book, which will be probably around the time this episode launches, so we can possibly have a follow-up at some stage. But it's a good point now, I think, to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's the same 5 questions that I ask of every guest, and the idea being you'll give us some insightful answers and inspire some action from the listener today.
All right, let's do it.
Excellent. Well, the number 1 question is, what's the number 1 thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
I don't know anything about innovation. I'm not sure. Be aware. Really just pick up your awareness and make sure that you're looking at what's happening outside in the world, and also really think about the decisions that you're making and why you're making those decisions. If you bring awareness to everything you do along that path of innovation, you're going to find yourself being a lot more successful.
Yeah, I love it. And we've talked quite a lot about listening and being mindful around innovation, so that certainly encapsulates that awareness. One of my favorite sayings, and I guess I grew up with this with my parents as well, and it doesn't work. It's a kind of a German rhyming 2-sentence thing. It essentially says that anyone that's not resourceful is lost. But it works much better in the German thing. But the point is we kind of observe stuff that's happening. Sometimes it's the animal world, sometimes it's young kids, sometimes it's you observe somebody else doing it and you see them do something that's unusual. And we basically then make that comment, which to me is a sign that we're observing other people or animals or kids doing something unusual and paying attention to that. That's a little bit of innovation there.
Oh, absolutely.
They wanted to achieve something. Often it's in the context of the normal thing didn't work, so then they do it differently.
You need stimulus. You need stimulus to spark that innovation, and absolutely observations of what other people are doing and things that are happening around you are so important. In fact, a lot of times today, we aren't able to do it too well because of these phones. Because every single moment that we have that we're not, doing something that's focused, we're on the phone and we're not observing. So how do you make sure that you are being aware of your environment to take in that stimulus?
Excellent. All right. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
It's got to be meditation. I'm going to stick with my theme. Every day I meditate in the morning, and not long, 5-10 minutes, and in the evening, 5-10 minutes. And what I'm trying to do is really clear my mind. And in the morning, I'm trying to set up my day. What do I really need to do today to be more innovative? What do I need to accomplish? What are the big rocks that I need to move? And at the end of the day, I reflect on how I did on the day, right? And was today a success? Was I more innovative today? And how might I do a better job tomorrow? And able to kind of just find that moment just to kind of reflect and think about it allows me to really assess my day and then move to progress the next day. And just having those meditative moments, those mindful moments, really just sets the time that I need personally to be able to do that. And a lot of times we just, we finish up work and we go hang out with the family, we have dinner, we go watch Netflix, and that's it. We don't think about, the next day until we get there. But if we start to be mindful about it and say, how do we really do? We're able to do a lot better the next day.
Yeah, great. I love it. And I think whatever practice we do to kind of get away from the routine and just let the mind wander and let things bubble up from the unconscious can be so valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my best ideas probably come in the shower, right? Where it's like, you're not really thinking about anything. You're just kind of showering, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, you know what? This would be a really good idea for a book or whatever it may be. Or this might be a better way to solve a problem that I'm having with my landscaping, whatever it is. Some weird ideas just come to me in the shower. So it's definitely when your subconscious mind is working.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
Yeah. I learned from one of my mentors that I should keep a small book with me at all times. And that small book should take all of your notes, and not all of your notes. I should say all the notes that really mean something. So this book right here, this is my best tool. It's a small little book, fits in my pocket, goes with me everywhere. But on these pages, there's different insights that I pick up along the way. So it might be something somebody said. It might be a podcast that I listened to. It might be just something that came to my mind. But I put everything in here. And my first page is, my purpose. That's the first thing that I see every single time I open up this book, what I want to do, right? I want to help others create change, and I want to do that by writing, speaking, and consulting. Help others really create that change. And each page here really comes down to what are the big things that I have learned over the course of time. And in fact, this is kind of where the Mindful Innovator, the book, came from, is from one of these. So it's just taking the thoughts over 3 years and putting it together.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, I love the little books, and I think getting thoughts and ideas out of our heads and in some form where we can recall them is so valuable. I've started using my smartwatch now because a lot of the times you talked about the shower. A lot of my ideas, I'm on my bike, out riding on my own, and that's when things bubble up. So I don't want to necessarily carry a notebook there. So I've trained myself to voice activate the recorder on my phone and just record things, and then I'd put them into a notebook later on. So
that's a great idea. I probably should do that for the shower because notebooks and showers don't work either.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, there is somebody really innovative actually. And there's probably quite a few of these around, writing easels or utensils in the shower that are showerproof.
Yeah,
and it was exactly for that, because so many people have ideas in the shower and say, well, you can't write it down. Well, here's something you can write it down on.
Well, I'm going to go on Amazon right after this.
Excellent. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Communication. Right. I mean, it comes down to that you need to communicate and sometimes even over communicate. A lot of times I've noticed that anything that innovation fails, it's because we did not communicate enough. We may have started a project with a key stakeholder, and then, 9 months to, a year, you come back to that key stakeholder and say, here you go. This is what we talked about. And they're going to say, well, what is this? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I thought we were going to do that. So if we communicate and make sure that we have the right cadence of communication with our key stakeholders, with our consumers, we're able to make sure that we get the constant feedback. They know what's coming, and making sure that we stay aligned the whole way through. So when I see innovation really successful is when you really plan purposefully the communication of when you're going to communicate and what you're going to communicate, and doing it on the proper frequency. So it really does come down to that communication piece that makes innovation so successful.
Yeah, and I think purposeful and frequency, setting it out regularly are a couple of things there, I think, to highlight.
Yeah, and one of the other things too with communication that I do is, if we're going into an innovation session, there's usually going to be a moment where people are really energized. And those moments, you want to bottle them up and keep them, right? Because there's so much energy happening, things are looking up. But guess what's going to happen in a week or two? They're going to get back to real life, and they're going to have problems, and they're going to forget about the session. They're going to forget about all the work. So it's a matter of encapsulating that moment, remembering it in a way that keeps them the momentum going. So it may have been something that was really inspiring and exciting. I'm going to capture that either through video or through a quote, and I'm going to bring that quote or that picture or that video back to the forefront in a month or 3 months down the road to keep that energy going. Hey guys, remember when this happened and how excited we were? We're getting a little bit closer. It's communicating those moments of joy along the way to keep that momentum going. So think purposely about how you're going to communicate those moments as well.
Yeah, that's a really important point, I think, and it brings that emotional connection that you talked about earlier in the stories that you shared.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now finally in the buzz, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
To differentiate yourselves, it can be very difficult, and you can go a lot of different routes here. But I think if you think about this one thing, just genuinely care about solving other people's problems, you're going to stand out. So many people go in with a motive, right? There's an ulterior motive to pretty much every conversation. Networking has a dirty name to it, but just because of the fact that, you're probably trying to get something from me. But if you go into every conversation, every meeting, every interaction with that genuine care of, how can I help you? You're going to really come out on top, and you're going to be able to differentiate yourself. And opportunities are going to come to you rather than you having to go find those opportunities. So don't look for anything when you're trying to help someone solve a problem. Just generally help them. Be thoughtful about it, and everything else will follow.
Yeah, I love it. And if we go into those kind of conversations without any expectations, it's my experience is it actually works a lot better.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because as soon as they know that what your expectations or what your motive is, the guard is up. They're going to be defending rather than trying to help you and have that conversation.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks, Matt. This has been wonderful. Now, where can people find out more about the work you do and sign up to get a hold of the book, and maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Yeah, I would love for everyone to reach out. And if you have any questions or just want to see some more of the work that I'm doing, you can reach me on LinkedIn at Matt Mueller Innovation. You can find me there pretty easily. Or you can actually pre-order the book today on Indiegogo. Just look up Matt Mueller, the Mindful Innovator, and you can find it there. And I'll put the link within this underneath this podcast when it comes out on the social media platforms. And check me out on innovationleader.com, where I write a column there about bi-monthly. So a lot of innovation and mindfulness tips right there for all of you innovation folks that are looking to create great change in this world.
Excellent. And we'll include those links in the show notes as well. And if the book, when it is launched, we'll add that link back into in either through the comments, or maybe it'll be launched by the time we publish.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Jürgen, for your time today and for introducing me to your audience. This has been awesome.
Yeah. What action would you like our listener to take away from our conversation today, Matt?
I would like for everyone just to be a little bit more mindful, a little bit more aware of the things that we're doing and the things that are happening around us, because I believe that every person in this world is capable of creating great change. There's 8 million people in this world, but how many of us are actually creating great change? And the thing is, a lot of people fear change, right? They're fearful of being judged for creating change, but you can do it. You absolutely can if we just think a little bit more mindfully about it and small baby steps. So I hope that everyone learns a little bit something from how to innovate mindfully and starts to make those steps to create change.
Yes, and like I said at the beginning, the paradox is that we all embrace change in many ways, and even if it's something little like every morning we get up and brush our teeth. Now that's a habit, and that's probably a regular habit, and it's probably a routine that doesn't need to change, but there is a change that takes place, right? As we go from dirty teeth to clean teeth, hopefully, if we do it well, shower, and so on. So we want that change, and we like to wear different clothes, and we like to experience different things. So yeah, just being mindful, I think, is a really good call to action.
Yeah. And one final story too, actually, you brought up a good point with creating change, and it was brushing your teeth. When I was on the innovation team, what I did was I drove to work every single day a different way and listened to a different genre of music every day. And the reason why was because I wanted to break out of my routine before I got into a routine. So it already started to create change in the way that I behaved before I even got to my job of innovating. So think about the small little things that you can change, and it will carry over and compound throughout the day.
Yeah, I love that. Love it. All right. Finally, who else should I get on the show, Matt, and why?
Oh, man. You've had so many great guests, but if I would go with anyone to get on the show, I would go with Martin Lindstrom. And the reason why is because he is an awesome change agent that can help transform cultures and really get inside the minds of consumers. Very good talks. I would check him out and definitely get him on your podcast.
Excellent. All right. Well, we'll reach out to Martin and see if we can have a conversation with him, bring him on the show as well.
I'll try and make an intro.
Excellent. I love that. All right. Well, thanks so much, Matt. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I'm really looking forward, as I said, to getting my hands on the book and reading through that and learning more, and all the best for the future. And let's keep in touch. Maybe we'll have the next conversation, and it sounds like there might be another book on the horizon as well.
Absolutely. Let's stay in touch. It's been great talking to you, Jürgen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.